Get started. Hello and happy May. Welcome to this latest edition of the Worcester Cultural Task Force. As those of you who've been with us before know, these meetings are open to anyone who's working in or interested in the arts and cultural community in the greater Worcester area. And today we are joined, we had a kind of an accidental theme while scheduling, and that theme is Holy Cross professors and what they're up to outside of work. So we'll get to introducing those folks in a second. For anyone who doesn't know, my name is Nikki Erskine. I run marketing for the Worcester Cultural Coalition, and I work in the Cultural Development Office. If everybody would like to just take a moment and unmute and introduce yourself, that would be great. I can pass it, if we want to do first name A through G, go ahead and say hi.
Hi.
Okay, so.
I think you said A through G, so that I'm Rich Artizone from Joy of Music. Happy to join you all.
Hi, I'm Allison Cohen. I have been a volunteer for multiple cultural organizations in Worcester and Worcester County. I'm angling for a paid position in the nonprofit cultural sector. If anyone has any bright ideas on how I might contribute on that basis, I'd be pleased to learn. I really just want to participate in these task force meetings to stay current and to stay connected. Pleased to be here.
Hi all, my name is Kelly Coates. I'm the Assistant Marketing Manager at the Worcester Art Museum, and it's good to see everybody.
All right, we can open up to anyone with a first name beginning with the letter before N.
I'll go. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Sutman. I'm the Director of Operations at Technicopia. It's a downtown makerspace. Pardon my weirdly blurry webcam, but I'm very happy to be here.
So nice to put a face to the name, Eric. I've heard many things about you.
What a reputation, I know.
I am Jen Jama, and I am the marketing coordinator for Mass Audubon Broad Meadowbrook.
Hey, Jen.
I'm Bill Wallace from the Worcester Historical Museum.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Summers. I'm the Artistic Director at Studio Theater Worcester.
I'm David Zudisbro, Major Gifts Officer at the Ecotarium.
I'm Darcy Schwartz. I'm from Artreach, Community Arts Center in Worcester.
Excellent. And that looks like most everybody. So if you haven't had a chance to say hi yet, please do so now.
Got it.
Hi, I'm Megan Blomgren Burgess. I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement for Preservation Worcester.
Hey everyone, I'm Penn Ruderman. I'm an architect working in the creative and cultural sectors in Worcester.
Hi, I'm Kay. I'm from Studio DeBella.
Hi folks, I'm Ruth Yaffa. I'm also with the Culture Department and Coalition.
Awesome. I do believe that's everyone. So welcome and thanks for taking a few minutes to join us today. So we are joined, as I said, by two Holy Cross professors, the first of whom will go today is Megan Ross. Dr. Megan Ross, excuse me. Hey, Megan. So you work with the Worcester Hip Hop Congress. That's how I first came to know about you. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about what you all are up to there, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to meet everyone on this screen. As Nikki mentioned, I am a professor over at Holy Cross, and I'm also the executive director of the Worcester Hip Hop Congress. We are a relatively new nonprofit in the area. We started almost a little over a year ago now. And so I just prepared a few slides and I wanted to share with you all a short little recap video from our last event that was Worcester Arts Council funded. So if it's okay with you, Nikki, I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. My slides are just up. So what exactly are we? What are we up to? Who are we made up of in the community? So I just created this first slide just to tell you a little bit more about us. So our mission statement is the following. The Worcester Hip Hop Congress is an arts nonprofit founded in 2021 by a collaborative of local artists, educators, and scholars with a shared love for hip hop and Worcester, Massachusetts. Our mission is to bring positive social change through hip hop education, self-expression, and community building activities. We celebrate the heritage of hip hop as a form of Black music and value diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of our efforts. So we do function as our own separate nonprofit. We are 501c3 official, but we are also associated with the national branch of the Hip Hop Congress. We are what they call a community chapter. So it's a really great way for our artists and community collaborators to be involved in kind of a bigger mission, right? The mission of the national branch of the Hip Hop Congress. And the idea to kind of start actually began, I was doing a lot of community-based learning projects out of my classes at the College of the Holy Cross, and it became very clear to me that there was such an interest in these types of activities that were already kind of happening in Worcester. And so we kind of all formalized together. So again, artists, educators, social activists in the area to kind of join forces to really kind of do a lot of different activities and good for the community. So on the screen here, you can see a few of the events that we were able to put together this past year. So on the left-hand side over here, we have artist Japhet Music, which if you have not heard of his music, you should check it out. Here he is working with students at the Nativity School last summer. He was able to run different lectures, different hands-on learning experiences for the students there. Over in the left-hand bottom corner, we have some of our B-boys of the Worcester community here, and they were performing on top of the dugout at Polar Park. That was also really fun last summer. We participated in Rock the Block over at Redemption Rock. And you can see the latest picture all the way on the right-hand corner is our big event. This was 2 weeks ago now at the Aurora Gallery, titled The Elements, Worcester Hip Hop Through the Ages, which was again funded by the Worcester Arts Council. And you can see here a bunch of different artists, including our head curator, Kaz Supernova, and they're all standing in front of CD covers from hip hop artists from Worcester in the last 20 or so years. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So just to give you a span again of who we are, what artists and what types of people make up our current board. I'm very proud to be the executive director and founder of the organization. We also have really great artists. Again, I don't know if any of these names are familiar to any of you on this call, but we do have a really great team of contributors here, including some students at the local colleges. So we're trying right now actually to broaden our reach and involve some of the younger youth in the high schools. So if you know of any students who might be willing to participate on the board, that's kind of our next initiative. And so I know I was able to speak a little bit on our past events, but just to kind of put them all out here for you, you know, it was just really fun to kind of reminisce and go through all the different things. Again, we're quite a young organization, only in our beginning of our second year here. But you can see the different types of activities. So again, school residencies, essay contests, web series, performances in the community. We had our first year anniversary party at Redemption Rock just a few weeks ago. 5-0 break. I should have included a photo of that, but you can find it on our Instagram page. It was really a cool event over at Mechanics Hall. We were going to have it at the Worcester Youth Center, and they actually flooded just before our big event, which was a jam panel and workshop, and Mechanics Hall was so kind to take us in. So we had the first jam session ever at Mechanics Hall this past fall. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, we have some information on our website. But what I thought that I would spend a little bit more time talking to you about again was our most recent event over at the Aurora Gallery, which is a space of the Creative Hub and one that we were funded generously through the Worcester Arts Council. So at this point, I just wanted to show you a little bit of a recap video to give you a sense, if you were not able to attend, what the exhibit itself looked like and what's the kind of future plans for this exhibit. And there might be some interesting tie-ins with the guest speakers for today. I didn't even necessarily plan that, but a lot of where I'm coming from in joining and helping to get the Worcester Hip Hop Congress up and running is from a historic standpoint. So I am a musicologist at heart. I'm a music historian, so a lot of the exhibit itself is something I'm very passionate about as a historian. So let me see if I can go ahead and switch over screens here. Can you all see the video? Yes? Okay. So the exhibit itself, called The Elements, we started this project last summer, actually. We opened up our digital living local Worcester Hip Hop archive, and the items that were on display, you got a little bit of a snippet of them. They included flyers, newspaper covers, CD covers, images of jams from the 80s in Worcester. I mean, it was all across the board. We tried to make it extremely inclusive, and it's a long spanning history, right? So all the way back from the late 70s up to the present. And hip hop, for those of you who don't know, includes a lot of different elements. So it's not just rapping, it includes the dance elements, so b-boys and b-girls, DJing, and also graffiti art. So we tried to make sure that each of the different elements were covered, hence kind of the name for the exhibit itself. And to kind of keep it alive and living, we had two DJs, kind of an OG of the Worcester's hip hop scene, DJ Cool Chris, and kind of a more contemporary DJ, DJ Kid Cash. And they were actually spinning largely local Worcester art. So if you were there in attendance, you would be able to hear some of the old MCs of the 70s and 80s and their tracks. And it was just a really great and fun event to celebrate the history of Worcester's hip hop scene, and one that we really want to continue on with, right, in our mission. So we've created this Living Local Worcester Hip Hop Archive, which aims to celebrate the significant talent that exists within the Worcester hip hop scene through digital preservation of related art, artifacts, and audio-visual materials. Ooh, my apologies. Publications and images. Annual exhibits accompanied by educational programming and performances will bring these materials to life, offering opportunities for our community to reflect on both the impact of local hip hop artists on the culture of Worcester, as well as to hip hop on a global scale. And just to kind of make the point of how exactly we're planning to do this on a global scale, my students this past semester at Holy Cross worked with the Worcester Hip Hop Congress and also the Universal Hip Hop Museum, which is out of the Bronx, New York. And we created a digital timeline of the last 5 or so years of Worcester's hip hop history. So we're hoping to get that up and running on the Universal Hip Hop Museum website, as well as our nonprofits website. So eventually the Universal Hip Hop Museum, they're doing similar projects with students across the globe. And so Worcester's hip hop history will be kind of transported, and you can kind of see what was happening in Worcester at the same time. Things were happening in New York, or different, what's happening in LA or Philadelphia. So it'll be a really great way of putting Worcester kind of on a map in a more global way. So we are hoping to expand out our mission of this exhibit and continue to solicit materials from members of the community. So whether that be art and artifacts, images, audiovisual material, or publications. And so eventually we'd like to be doing events like this on a biannual basis. We would love to have a space where we could actually preserve and save all of the materials and keep them in conditions that would allow for them to be preserved and celebrated for years to come. So this is kind of one of the exciting things that we've been working on. And I can't have this presentation without naming Kaz Supernova, who again was our head curator, and he's actually working on the film documenting Worcester's hip hop history. So a lot of the materials he was able to help with us and provide for the exhibit. Beyond that, this summer we are looking towards an event called All In Together Now, which is funded by the Greater Worcester Community Foundation. And it will be similar to 5-0 Break, the event I mentioned earlier in the presentation at Mechanics Hall, but it'll include competitions among all the different elements, right? So one of our big goals of the Worcester Hip Hop Congress is to, again, integrate those different elements in a way that's kind of original to the art form. So this jam, all-day jam, will take place outside in Worcester this summer. We're still debating on which date exactly, so stay tuned. But you will be able to see all the different elements and all the different artists who participate in those elements kind of coming together and joining forces. There will be also youth activities. We'd love to bring back the sneaker workshop. We just did this past 2 weeks ago now. It was part of the Elements exhibit. We had graffiti artist Christian New Element come in, and he helped all different youth from the middle schools and high schools to create sneakers with kind of hip hop inspired designs. And I will say the event was very well attended. We even had some toddlers there, my daughter included, participating. So it was a really fun event. So I just will leave you all with this screen here. Feel free to contact us, get in touch with us, follow us on Instagram, Worcester Hip Hop Congress. If you yourself have any photos or images from your own experiences in Worcester, I never quite know. Sometimes people have random photos in their archives of, so personal archives. So please let us know. Part of our recent GoFundMe efforts are, again, to kind of have a more permanent space for exhibits like the one we had at the Aurora Gallery just a few weeks ago. And we're always looking for volunteers, whether it be for volunteering at different events or helping us with the digital preservation of the archive itself. So I think that I'll stop there. And if there's any questions or comments or anything of the like, I'm happy to answer them. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Nikki.
That's awesome. Thank you, Megan. I didn't realize how many, like just the diverse range of events that you all were hosting. I think the first Worcester Hip Hop Congress event I went to, and I'm blanking on exactly what it was called. It was like Hip Hop 101, something kind of, what was it? Do you remember? It was at the pop-up.
The Words You Can See, the
yes.
voluntary. Yeah, that was a really great event. It was one that Angel, I can't take full credit for, or even the Congress can't take full credit for, but Angel Geronimo, our VP, he's been putting together, it was the third round of Words You Can See, and it's all about music videos that artists created, and they got the opportunity to kind of break it down in front of a live audience and show what went into the production, what went into the lyrics. So it's kind of a behind the scenes look at those, kind of like a pop-up music video.
What I really liked about it is that I wasn't raised with hip hop. Like it can't, and a lot of times when you're just coming into like a new genre, a new culture, a new anything, it can feel like there's this big barrier to entry. Like, how do I actually enjoy this? How do I learn to tell what's good from what's bad? what I liked about the format of the Words You Can See program is that it was aimed to be accessible to anyone, regardless of how deep hip hop runs in your blood. Like they explained how they came up with the lyrics, what influenced the different decisions they made. And it was just a really cool way to connect to something that I had felt outside of for a while. So I think it's fantastic, and I can't wait to see what you all do next. So before we move over to Dr. Doughton, are there any other quick questions for Megan? Give you all a 5-second countdown.
I would ask just quickly what the relationship is between the Hip Hop Congress and the contemporary hip hop scene in Worcester, right? Is there ways that you're working together with some of the folks that are involved in that, or is it more of a kind of archival project?
Yeah, so we're extremely lucky that we work so closely with contemporary hip hop artists. So just on the board right now, half of the board is made up of artists who are producing, recording, involved in the hip hop community, just, as their life. So it's really kind of a lucky situation for us. And I think that's one of the reasons we've been able to be successful, is we just have all such different lanes. So, I'm more interested in the historical angle just because of my own training and my own interests. But I think having a force where there are these artists who are just so in touch with like everything that's happening right now in the community, it's huge. It's so meaningful that we have that connection.
Awesome, thank you.
Awesome. Well, it's 4:31 now, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for our next guest, Dr. Thomas Doughton, Professor Dr. Thomas Doughton, the man with many titles, who has been working very hard on the Worcester Black History Trail. So, Dr. Doughton, I have all of your images over here. If you want to just let me know how to hop through those, I'll jump back and pass the mic over to you.
Thank you very much. And you have the email addresses so that you could send these images to people, or they could download them or whatever, if they want to have access to them. So I would begin by saying that on June 2nd, we're going to have a community unveiling of the first of 5 Black history markers that are part of a collaborative project involving the College of the Holy Cross, the City of Worcester, the local branch of the NAACP, and a local community group, the Laurel Clayton Project. And it has been very much an activity of community people concerned about the politics of representation and how African-American history is represented to the community here. So that the first marker will be at the corner of John Street and North Ashland Street. And if you could do 001, please, Nikki. Okay, so I think you're having the same difficulty I seem to be having. There is, are folks able to see this marker?
I could see it there just at the end.
All right. This is at John Street and North Ashland Street, and it is an effort on the part of the community to remember a very significant clustering of people of color that dates in that area from the time when North Ashland Street was actually the end of the development of the town of Worcester, and the huge Lincoln estate remained significantly undeveloped. And at the very last street in town, where there was an open sewer in the 1850s, the first of Worcester's people of color coming from the South began settling there. And it became such a significant clustering of people that by the 1890s, a church is found there that still remains there to this day, John Street Baptist Church, which was the fourth of the congregations of people of color in Worcester, created in the 19th century. So simultaneously, at 4 other locations, this collaboration is unveiling 5 of these markers called kiosks by the city of Worcester. One is at Westfield and May Street near Kentucky Fried Chicken, remembering an 18th century Afro-Indian family still here in Worcester. The one is at the site of the former AME Zion Church on Belmont Street. It recalls that congregation. One is at Newton Square, where we remember a relationship between a fugitive slave, Isaac Mason, who was sent to Worcester by the Boston Vigilance Committee, welcomed into the homes of Black folks here in Worcester, given employment by Rejoice Newton at Newton's substantial farm at Newton Square. And Isaac Mason is actually one of the people who flees to escape slave catchers, but he returns to Worcester and is one of 8 individuals who wrote their autobiographies, their life as slaves who lived in Worcester at this period of time. So the range of what was attempted with this Worcester Black History Trail was to come up with a group of fixed markers that look like this, that will go in the ground. That is one part of the trail. 5 of them are being unveiled in June. Simultaneously, or around, as part of the trail effort, the project will have ready for the public very soon a phone application enabling people to travel around Worcester and get a little bit of information on the almost 40 sites the community has determined to be significant to telling the history of the people of color in Worcester from slavery days in the 18th century through the 1950s, early 1960s. This is exclusively what this project is going to be looking at. A second phase, which is represented by some samples here, is the creation of an online description of the major sites of Worcester Black history. That's a second and separate activity. And at the same time, if we could go ahead to what are called stones. Let's see if any will show up. Separate from these kinds of markers, the community will be seeing embedded in sidewalks here in Worcester approximately 25 bronze markers like this that will refer people through a code to a more extended discussion. But these are sites that are also important to the history, but are locations at which markers cannot be placed for a variety of reasons. In some instances, we're talking about buildings that no longer exist. In other cases, we're talking about privately owned property. So that in this solution, these stumbling stones that have been created in Europe, if we could go forward, if you could just show people some other examples, please, Nikki. I think there are 4 or 5 of them. You know, starting a generation ago, individuals at different locations in Europe wanted to commemorate people who were victims of the Holocaust, other Nazi ethnic cleansing, political violence, et cetera, and the easiest way for this to be done was to place these small stumbling stones on sidewalks, as they were called. In a generation, there are now almost 80,000 of these at multiple locations across Europe, commemorating different victims of of World War II. We are beginning here in the United States to put in place small stones like this, remembering the experience of enslaved people, particularly in the Northeast. Here are a couple examples. So that the bulk of the project will entail seeing embedded over the next year to two these kinds of locations at these kinds of stones at multiple locations that will be fabricated and put in the ground through a project, a collaborative project involving vocational students, Worcester students. So it is something we will be doing in conjunction with students. So this is the shape of the project that we've been working on actually since 2019. And it coincided with a 2019 community reunion in expectation that we would have every other year a reunion of people from the old neighborhoods here in Worcester, people of color from the old neighborhoods. Obviously, COVID has gotten in the way of that. It is anticipated that folks will assemble next summer, but in the summer of 2019, when the History Trail was announced, over 600 people came out for a paid dinner event, part of 2 days of activities at Holy Cross, including a barbecue, cookout, events for people's children, et cetera, which was part of a commitment to the community by the college and a reflection of a long-standing engagement between Holy Cross and its African American community. Some of this goes back to online material generated, believe it or not, as long as 25 years ago at a website entitled Worcester and its People, where a large part of that web presence dealt with the history of people of color in this region. So basically, this is the scope of what we've been doing with the Worcester Black History Trail. There are obviously successes and there have been failures, and certainly a project like this presents multiple challenges. I mean, certainly one major challenge is historiographical in terms of getting it right, because there's so much of what has been represented as the history of people of color in this area is inaccurate. It is almost as if critical judgment is suspended when people do a little dance, as it were. Some of us find this toxic goodwill to be harmful and counter to the history of people here in Worcester. I'm not going to belabor the point, but in part, the entire community effort came about through what Worcester's community considers to be a misrepresentation of our history through what is called the Veterans Memorial at Lincoln Square. I will just simply say that outside the old AME Zion Church was a billboard poster, recruitment poster, put up in December 1943 to encourage people to enlist at a time when all kinds of community groups and churches were doing a similar thing. Somehow, a legend was created that the city took that into custody and promised to give it back. Now, that never happened, but even if it had, it was not a monument or a memorial, but a recruitment poster. And when the city was talking about doing this, community meetings were held where people said, this list from December 1943 is an incomplete list. It does not list all of the men and women who volunteered before the end of the war. Please do not put something up in stone as if it is a monument or a memorial, or as if you are doing us a great favor. So our effort here has been very much an effort where we attempt to represent a community that wants to have some say in how its history is represented, and also wants to challenge what we are calling the toxic goodwill of many cultural institutions in the Worcester area when it comes to the history and culture of people of color. So I will pause at that point because I see it taking up 15 minutes. I think we both answer questions and would like to answer any questions that people might have. And if the material I had hoped to be able to summarize can be emailed to you, you know, the folks would respond to questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for that overview, Dr. Doughton. That is a tremendous amount of work that's going into this. And it's so important to be able to, I mean, just looking through those stepping stones that you shared, you know, I recognize that some of them were German, a couple more might have been Polish, but when the enslaved ones came up, I'm glad the screen wasn't bigger on me, because I just got this gut punch seeing like this actually happened. It happened here. And to be able to see something like that in the day-to-day, it's very powerful. So it's tremendous that we're going to have these kiosks, these markers around Worcester to talk about the things that actually happened, the lives that were actually lived here. So
some of the sites I think will work well with this kind of commemoration. I mean, for example, one of the most famous events in Worcester history, the so-called Doughton riot, you know, occurs at Foster and Main Street. There's no opportunity there for a kiosk. And even if there were, well, directly across the street is the Church of Thomas Wentworth Higginson, which would merit another kiosk if we were doing kiosks. And then directly across the street from both of them would be the site of Brindley Hall, not just noteworthy because of women's conventions or Frederick Douglass or Sojourner Truth, but for a long period of time, it was the home of the GAR Post 10, the veterans group, to which most of the men of color in Worcester who had served in the Civil War were members. So that just at that one corner, things would be very clotted if in fact there was an expectation that people would be able to pause and read text at what the city calls kiosks. But if they can get small markers on the sidewalk that could have a code referring them somewhere else for more information, then we're going to be able to draw attention to many locations that can't be marked with kiosks. And those are good examples. And certainly any Worcester Black History Trail that fails to mention Thomas Wentworth Higginson shouldn't be considered a trail. Similarly, the famous Doughton riot, because it is at that corner in response to his unsuccessful attempt to apprehend a barber named Jenkins, a color fugitive slave here, that Doughton makes the last attempt in Massachusetts by a federal marshal to apprehend a fugitive slave. That's the very last attempt in 1854. No other attempt is made in the Commonwealth after his unsuccessful experience here in Worcester. So the community group recognizes that there would need to be a variety of different kinds of ways of putting together a trail, unlike, let's say, the African American Heritage Trail, you know, which connects 16 sites in a walking trail. This is not a walking trail necessarily. The only intact whole trail will be online, but parts of it following the patterns established by Preservation Worcester and the Canal District and other groups that have very successfully put together trails that people use and materials to go along with them.
That's a tremendous amount of work, and I can't wait to see all of it put together. We do have just 10 minutes left, and I got to imagine multiple people on this call are probably waiting for 5 o'clock. So if anyone wants to start thinking about a question you might have for Thomas or for Megan, feel free to raise your hand, and I've got my eye on the participants list here. So one question, which is actually for both of you to kick us off here. I'm curious how much of what you do in the Worcester Hip Hop Congress, or how much of your work with the Black History Trail, how much of that ties back to what you do in the classroom, if any?
Well, Megan, so I'll start. Megan's already given multiple examples of ways that her students are involved. And I try with courses I teach to have students do student-based research, if wherever possible, to be engaged in the community.
Yeah, I mean, I would say similarly for all of my classes, it's really important that they have that connection to the community. There's only so much I can teach them in my classroom, in the four walls of the classroom, right? I myself am more of a hip hop educator and historian, so to have students be immersed in the actual culture that's alive and well, and to learn from artists and practitioners is really important. So this past semester, our project was the digital timeline project. So that was one of the ways that my students worked on creating and presenting a historical narrative of Worcester's local hip hop community. Last year, my students worked on a web series, so they interviewed with members of the Worcester hip hop scene. And actually those videos were part of the timeline. So I like to see some kind of growth of projects as well. But yeah, definitely it's really important that there is that connection.
And there's more material in what Nikki would have sent out, but we're also all next year in several different classes at Holy Cross working on a joint project entitled The Old Neighborhood. What we are doing is documenting the community that existed on the east side of Worcester, the so-called Black neighborhood that never was a Black neighborhood, but we're documenting that community of people of color before the urban renewal movements of the 1950s. So we have taken 1952 as the year, and we have already established every person of color living on the east side of Worcester in 1952, and we will have completed, we hope, for next summer, the big project with online obituaries, photographs, interviews, describing who some of these people are, because there's still some people alive where even some people at Worcester think that that part of town was a Black neighborhood rather than an integrated neighborhood. And, so that we want to dispel the notion that there was a Black neighborhood in Worcester. There were never any Black neighborhoods in Worcester.
How much time that must have taken. I'm imagining like combing through Ancestry, combing through library records. That's a phenomenal resource.
It is shared, the links to that the material shared with you in describing next year's project, so that you have a link now where you can look at who the people of color arranged alphabetically or by street, and you're able to look at 1952 as a year with photocopies of the entire east side from the city directory at that period of time. So you can appreciate why older Black folks in Worcester will say, wait a minute, Black? Well, I grew up with Finnish families next door and Armenians on the other side, and my best friend whom I still see, was an Italian American. So that the notion, you know, trying to genericize Worcester's Black history to make it something it was not is troubling. And so you have some of that material you can look at already.
Which of these links would you recommend? There's a few of them here. I just want to drop at least one in the chat for, there's folks living on the East Side in
Yes.
1952. That one?
You want to just click that?
Oh, sure. All right, we are loading.
Okay, so that is what one of the links you have already would look like. So that this is the by street listing of people who live in that neighborhood.
So do you have a website, like a common place that that folks can go to maybe learn more about it all in one space?
We just today had a very complicated Zoom meeting on this entire topic, and that we anticipate in the next week to 10 days to have a phone number, a contact person, and all of that in place. We have not done that because we have been more busy doing work than promoting or marketing or outreach. But we have been told by Holy Cross that we are remiss to do these things.
I know that struggle well. So with just a couple minutes left, I know you both have some projects coming up. Thomas, the June 2nd, is it? Remind us of the date that the first marker is going in.
That's the date. And I think most of your organizations and many of you individually, if you haven't received the press release from the city manager's office, will be getting a press invitation or an invitation from the city of Worcester, because this is the city's unveiling, where in the summer, we are having our own community unveiling the first week in August, because we have continued to celebrate Emancipation Day, which has been a major event in Worcester's community back to the 1830s. And our last Emancipation Day event occurred in 1959, where the Elm Park Community School was located. So we also want to remind our people, even in Worcester, that there's something that we celebrated, as did many other people in New England, Canada, the British colonies, West Africa, the first really transnational celebration of people of color, Emancipation Day, August 1st.
All right, so I think we have time for one more question. Anybody from the panel? All right. Well, with that, I'll give you 2 minutes back. I want to thank our guests, Megan Ross and Thomas Doughton, for joining us and sharing about their works today. Hopefully it stops raining here for real and we can all get outside a little bit and enjoy the rest of our night. So thank you again for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.